A high-pitched cry cut through the silence. Not the wind, not an animal, a baby, a German shepherd, ribs pressing against his matted fur, froze mid-step. His ears twitched toward the sound, coming from the roadside. Hunger and exhaustion weighed him down, but the cry pulled him forward like a command. Paws slapped against hot asphalt as he limped toward the source. There, on the dusty shoulder of the road, sat a cardboard box, its flaps weakly flapping in the breeze. Inside, wrapped in a thin blanket, lay a newborn. Skin flushed from heat, lips dry, tiny fists waving weakly in the air. The dog didn't hesitate. With gentle teeth, he gripped the box's edge and began dragging it toward the shade of a nearby tree. The cardboard box scraped against the rough pavement as the German shepherd dragged it inch by painful inch toward the scraggly tree at the roadside. His muscles screamed in protest. Days without proper food had left him weak, but the baby's whimpers drove him forward. Just as he reached the patch of shade, a sharp pain shot through his paw. He yelped, dropping the box momentarily. A piece of broken glass, glittering maliciously in the sunlight, was embedded between his pads. Blood mixed with the dust on the road as he limped the final few steps. Inside the box, the baby's cries grew weaker. The thin blanket was soaked with sweat, the midday sun beating down mercilessly. The dog nosed at the tiny face, feeling the frightening heat radiating from the infant's skin. He needed help. Fast. Turning toward the road, he let out a series of sharp, demanding barks. A few cars zoomed past, windows up, air conditioning on, drivers oblivious to the drama unfolding on the shoulder. Then came the sound of screeching tires. A beat-up pickup truck swerved onto the shoulder, kicking up a cloud of dust. The door flew open, and a burly man in oil-stained overalls jumped out. "What the hell?" he muttered, spotting the dog first, then the box. When he peered inside, his tanned face went pale. Jesus Christ! He whipped out his phone with shaking hands, calling 911 as he carefully lifted the box into his truck. The dog tried to follow, but his injured paw gave out. "Easy there, boy," the man said, noticing the blood trail. He hesitated for just a second before scooping up the 80-pound shepherd like a baby and loading him into the truck bed. As they sped toward town, the dog kept his eyes locked on the box through the rear window. The baby had stopped crying altogether now, and that silence was more terrifying than any sound. At the hospital, chaos erupted. Nurses swarmed the truck before it even fully stopped. The man shouted, "Newborn in distress!" Found on Route 27, as medical professionals whisked the baby away. No one noticed the injured dog slipping out of the truck bed, trailing blood down the pristine hospital hallway as he followed the scent of the child. Around a corner, he came face to face with a security guard. "How'd you get in here?" the guard demanded, reaching for his radio. The dog growled low in his throat, not aggressive but desperate. A nurse gasped. "That's the dog that was with the abandoned baby. Look at his paw!" The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats before the guard sighed and stepped aside. "All right, hero, let's get you patched up too." As a vet technician cleaned his wound, the dog's ears perked up at a familiar sound, the baby's cry, stronger now, coming from a nearby room. He tried to stand, but the vet assistant held him down. "Easy, boy, you've done enough." But the whimpers continued, and something in that sound told the shepherd his job wasn't finished yet. Little did he know, across town, a woman was frantically searching for something she'd left by the roadside, and she wasn't alone. 2 men in a black sedan were asking questions about a missing package. Their eyes were hard, their hands never far from their waistbands. Whatever was in that box, it was more valuable than anyone could have guessed, and they weren't about to let some mutt ruin their plans. Meanwhile, in the hospital nursery, the baby, now cleaned up and swaddled in a clean blanket, was being examined by a doctor. "She's dehydrated but otherwise healthy," the doctor said. Then he paused, peering closer. "Wait, what's this?" On the baby's tiny ankle was a small, strange mark. Not a birthmark. Something that looked almost like a barcode. The German shepherd, sensing the sudden tension in the room, began to growl. His hackles rose as the doctor reached for the phone. Something was very, very wrong. And if these humans couldn't protect the baby, he would. Even if it killed him. The growl rumbling from the German shepherd's chest grew louder as the doctor's fingers hovered over the phone. The air in the hospital room thickened with tension. Something about that tiny barcode on the baby's ankle had changed everything. The doctor hesitated, his eyes darting between the infant and the dog, standing protectively beside the examination table. This shouldn't be here," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The nurse beside him leaned in, her breath catching when she saw the mark. "It looks like some kind of tracking label," she whispered. The dog's ears twitched at the word tracking. He didn't understand human language, but he understood danger. Just then, the door burst open. The burly truck driver who had brought them to the hospital stood there, his face flushed. "You gotta see this," he said, holding up his phone. On the screen was a news alert. "Police investigating abandoned vehicle on Route 27. Possible connection to missing infant case." The photo showed a black sedan, its front bumper dented abandoned in a ditch not 5 miles from where the baby had been found. The dog let out a sharp bark, his body tensing. The baby stirred in response, her tiny fingers curling into fists as if she, too, sensed the unease crawling through the room. Down the hall, the hospital's front doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. 2 men in dark jackets strode in, their movements too deliberate, their eyes scanning the lobby like predators. One of them flashed a badge, too quickly for anyone to see it clearly, and said something to the receptionist. Her nervous laughter carried down the corridor. The German shepherd's head snapped toward the sound. His nostrils flared, catching a scent that made the fur along his spine stand on end. Them. The same men from the roadside? Or worse, someone else who knew about the baby. The doctor, finally shaking off his shock, grabbed the phone and dialed a number from memory. "We need security, now." His voice was low but urgent. The nurse swaddled the baby tighter, her hands trembling. The dog positioned himself between them and the door, his injured paw forgotten. Blood still seeped from the cut, leaving faint smudges on the tile floor. He didn't care. If those men came through that door, he would meet them with teeth. Outside, the black sedan's occupants weren't the only ones searching. A woman, early 30s, her clothes disheveled, her eyes wild with panic, pushed through the hospital doors. "Please," she gasped to the receptionist. "Have you seen a baby? She was in a box. I didn't mean to leave her, Her voice broke. The receptionist's expression shifted from confusion to pity. "Are you the mother?" she asked gently. The woman opened her mouth, but before she could answer, a hand clamped onto her arm. One of the men in the dark jackets leaned in, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions." The German shepherd, still guarding the nursery door, suddenly stiffened. A new scent hit him. Fear, sweat, something metallic. Gun oil. His growl turned into a snarl. The nurse gasped. "What's wrong with him?" The doctor followed the dog's gaze to the hallway. "We need to move the baby, now." But it was too late. The door handle turned. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a sliver of the brightly lit hallway beyond. The German shepherd's muscles coiled like springs, his entire body trembling with barely contained fury. His lips pulled back to reveal gleaming canines as a polished black shoe crossed the threshold. Then everything happened at once. A gunshot cracked through the air, the sound bouncing off the sterile hospital walls. The dog launched himself forward with a roar that shook the windows, his powerful body colliding with the first intruder. Screams erupted from the nurse's station down the hall as the second man raised his weapon. But the shepherd was already moving, twisting in midair to clamp his jaws around the gunman's wrist. A sickening crunch echoed through the room as bones gave way beneath his powerful bite. In the chaos, the doctor snatched up the swaddled infant and bolted for the emergency exit. The baby's piercing wails mixed with the shouts of panicking staff and the guttural snarls of the protective shepherd. Blood, both canine and human, smeared across the linoleum floor in chaotic streaks. The dog took a glancing blow from a metal clipboard swung by one of the attackers but barely flinched. His world had narrowed to one primal purpose: protect the child at all costs. Outside the hospital, the woman who had claimed to be the mother broke free from her captor's grip with a desperate wrench. She sprinted toward the commotion, her face a mask of terror and determination. "They're not police!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "They're going to kill her!" Security guards finally came pouring into the hallway, tasers drawn, but froze at the scene before them. A bloodied German shepherd standing over two moaning men, his amber eyes burning with feral intensity. The doctor reappeared at the far end of the corridor, the baby clutched tightly to his chest. "Call the real police," he shouted. "These men are armed." The shepherd's ears pricked at the sound of the infant's cries. He whirled toward the doctor, his body still thrumming with adrenaline. For one heart-stopping moment, the security guards tensed, unsure if the massive dog would attack. But the animal simply limped to the doctor's side and sat, his bloodied tail giving a single, decisive thump against the floor. In the parking lot, tires squealed as the black sedan peeled away. The woman collapsed against a wall, sobbing uncontrollably. "They took my sister," she gasped between heaving breaths. "They made me. The baby was supposed to be." Her words dissolved into hysterical weeping. The pieces were beginning to form a terrifying picture. This was no simple case of child abandonment. The barcode on the infant's ankle, the armed pursuers, the woman's cryptic confession, they all pointed to something far more sinister. As police sirens wailed in the distance, the German shepherd refused to leave the baby's side. Even when the EMTs arrived to treat his injured paw, he kept one watchful eye on the tiny bundle in the doctor's arms. The mystery deepened when an officer examining the scene discovered something startling. Embedded beneath the barcode was what appeared to be a microscopic chip. "This isn't just tracking," the officer murmured. "This is next-level tech. Military grade, maybe." The hospital administrator, pale and shaken, pulled the lead detective aside. "We just got a call from the state health department," he whispered. "They're demanding we turn over the infant immediately. Said it's a matter of national security." Outside, unnoticed in the commotion, a nondescript van with tinted windows pulled into the ambulance bay. Two figures in white coats emerged, their IDs flashing official-looking seals. The shepherd's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring as he caught a new, ominous scent on the air. His warning growl started low in his chest, building to a thunderous crescendo that made everyone in the hallway freeze. The baby chose that moment to open her eyes for the first time since arriving at the hospital. Not the unfocused gaze of a newborn, but an eerily alert, knowing look that sent chills down the spines of everyone who saw it. Her tiny hand reached out toward the growling dog as if in silent communication. The German shepherd fell instantly quiet, his entire body still except for the faintest tremor of anticipation. Whatever was coming, whatever secrets this child carried, he would stand between her and the world until his last breath. The real battle, it seemed, was only just beginning. The hospital hallway fell into an eerie silence as the two figures in white coats stepped forward, their movements too smooth, too calculated. The German shepherd's muscles tensed, his body vibrating with a low, continuous growl that seemed to shake the very air. The lead detective, a grizzled man with decades of experience, instinctively moved between them and the baby. "Hold on," he said, his voice firm. "Nobody takes this child until we know what the hell is going on." One of the white-coated figures, a woman with piercing blue eyes, smiled, but it didn't reach her gaze. "This infant is part of a classified government program," she said smoothly, pulling out a badge that bore no name, only a string of numbers. "Her retrieval is non-negotiable." The shepherd's growl deepened, his teeth bared. He didn't trust them. Not their scent, not their voices, not the way they looked at the baby like she was an object rather than a living being. The sobbing woman from earlier suddenly lunged forward, her tear-streaked face twisted in desperation. "They're lying," she screamed. "They're the ones who took my sister. They're the ones who—" A sharp crack echoed through the hallway as one of the white-coated figures pulled a sleek, silenced pistol from beneath their coat and fired. The woman crumpled to the ground, a dark stain spreading across her chest. Chaos erupted. The detective drew his weapon, but before he could react, the second figure moved with unnatural speed, disarming him with a single, fluid motion. The German shepherd didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the shooter, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's forearm with enough force to shatter bone. The gun clattered to the floor as the man howled in pain. The second figure turned toward the baby, their expression cold and detached. The doctor, holding the infant, stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to run. The shepherd, still locked onto his target, released his grip just long enough to reposition, then lunged again, this time going straight for the throat. But before his teeth could connect, the air around them seemed to ripple. A blinding flash of light filled the corridor, and suddenly the two figures were gone, vanished, as if they had never been there at all. The only evidence left behind was the bleeding woman on the floor and the stunned silence of everyone in the hallway. The baby, still clutched in the doctor's arms, let out a soft whimper. The detective, breathing heavily, turned to the nearest officer. "Lock down the hospital, no one in or out." Then his gaze fell on the infant, and for the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. "What the hell is this, kid?" The shepherd, panting from exertion, limped back to the doctor's side. His ears pricked at the sound of approaching sirens. More authorities, but whose? He didn't know. All he knew was that the danger wasn't over. The baby's tiny fingers curled into his fur, her grip surprisingly strong. Outside, unnoticed in the commotion, a shadowy figure watched from the rooftop of a nearby building. A high-tech device in their hand hummed softly as it recorded every moment of the confrontation. They pressed a button, and a voice crackled through the receiver. "Asset is still compromised. Proceed with extraction protocol." The German shepherd's head snapped up, his senses screaming at him. They were coming back, and this time they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. The hospital lockdown sirens wailed like a wounded animal as the German shepherd pressed himself against the doctor's legs, his body vibrating with tension. The baby in the doctor's arms had gone eerily quiet, her wide eyes scanning the chaotic hallway with an intelligence far beyond her newborn appearance. The detective barked orders into his radio, his voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "I want every exit sealed. National security or not, we're dealing with a shooting victim and possible kidnapping." Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed like angry hornets before plunging the hallway into darkness. Emergency backups kicked in seconds later, casting everything in a dim red glow. The shepherd's night vision sharpened instantly, his pupils expanding to take in every detail. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something metallic and wrong. A whisper of movement came from the ventilation grate above them. The dog's head snapped up just as the metal covering clattered to the floor. A figure dropped down with cat-like grace, not one of the white-coated agents, but someone new. Dressed in black tactical gear, their face obscured by a high-tech visor, they landed in a crouch. The detective reached for his sidearm, but the stranger was faster. A gloved hand shot out, pressing something against the detective's neck. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. The German shepherd launched himself at the intruder with a roar that shook the walls, but the figure moved with impossible speed, sidestepping the attack and producing a device that emitted a high-pitched whine. The sound pierced the dog's sensitive ears like a knife. He stumbled, disoriented, his legs buckling beneath him. Through the pain, he saw the intruder reach for the baby. Then, gunfire. Real gunfire. Unsilenced and deafening in the enclosed space. The tactical figure jerked backward as blood bloomed across their shoulder. The shepherd shook his head to clear the ringing in his ears and saw the truck driver from earlier standing at the end of the hall, a smoking revolver in his hand. "Nobody messes with my rescue," the man bellowed. The distraction was enough. The baby suddenly let out a cry unlike anything the shepherd had ever heard. Not the wail of an infant, but a resonant, almost melodic sound that made the air itself vibrate. The remaining fluorescent bulbs shattered in unison. The tactical intruder clutched their head as if in agony. Even the truck driver staggered, dropping to one knee. Only the shepherd seemed unaffected. He seized the moment, surging forward to clamp his jaws around the intruder's leg. The taste of blood filled his mouth as he dragged the assailant down. Somewhere in the chaos, a new voice cut through the din. Calm, authoritative. "Stand down, all personnel." The lights flickered back to full brightness, revealing a dozen armed soldiers in unmarked uniforms blocking both ends of the hallway. At their center stood a gray-haired man in a crisply pressed suit, his expression unreadable. "My name is Director Kessler," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. "This situation has been contained." The German shepherd didn't believe it for a second. He positioned himself between the newcomers and the baby, his lips curled back in a silent snarl. The director's gaze flicked to him, then to the child, and something like recognition flashed in his eyes. "Ah," he murmured, "so it's true. Subject Omega has imprinted." Before anyone could react, the baby did something impossible. She reached out with one tiny hand, and the shepherd felt a sudden electric jolt of understanding flood his mind. Images flashed behind his eyes, a sterile laboratory, needles, strange machines, and a word, clear as a bell, though no one had spoken it. "Run." The director's expression hardened. "Take them, alive." As the soldiers advanced, the hospital's sprinkler system suddenly erupted, filling the hallway with a curtain of water. The shepherd felt the baby's strange energy surge through him again, his muscles coiled, his senses sharpened beyond anything natural. And for the first time in his life, the German shepherd understood exactly what he needed to do. The helicopter blades thundered through the night sky as the German shepherd pressed his body protectively over the baby, shielding her from the biting wind that whipped through the open cabin door. The truck driver, now revealed as something far more than a simple Good Samaritan, worked the controls with practiced ease, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for pursuit. Below them, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, the hospital now just a distant speck in the urban sprawl. The baby stirred in the shepherd's grasp, her tiny fingers curling into his fur, as if drawing strength from his presence. Then the radio crackled to life. A voice, distorted by static but urgent, broke through. "Raven, you're off course. Repeat, you're off course. The rendezvous point is—" The truck driver, Raven, slammed a fist onto the console, cutting off the transmission. His knuckles whitened around the controls. "They've compromised the frequency," he muttered, more to himself than to his unusual passengers. The shepherd's ears twitched. He didn't like the tension in the man's shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he adjusted their heading toward a range of dark mountains in the distance. Without warning, the baby's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. A new vision flooded the shepherd's mind. A military base hidden in the mountains, its hangars filled with aircraft unlike any he'd ever seen. Sleek, silent, wrong. And beneath it all, deep underground, rows upon rows of glass pods, each containing a child with that same eerie barcode on their ankle. The vision burned away as quickly as it came, leaving the shepherd panting, his tongue lolling from the psychic aftershock. Raven glanced back at them, his expression unreadable. "She's showing you, huh?" he said quietly. "Good. You'll understand soon enough." The helicopter banked sharply, diving toward a narrow canyon hidden between two jagged peaks. The shepherd's stomach lurched as they dropped altitude at a terrifying speed, the rocky walls flashing by mere feet from the rotor blades. Just when it seemed they would crash, a hidden landing pad materialized beneath them, its surface marked with faint, glowing symbols that pulsed in time with the baby's quickening breaths. As the skids touched down, a section of the mountain itself slid open, revealing a cavernous tunnel lit by flickering blue lights. Raven killed the engine and turned in his seat, his face suddenly exhausted in the eerie glow. "Listen carefully," he said, meeting the shepherd's gaze with startling intensity. "What you saw in her vision? That's just one facility. There are dozens more across the country, and every single one is filled with kids like her, engineered, enhanced, and enslaved." He reached for the baby, then hesitated when the shepherd's growl vibrated through the cabin. "I'm not your enemy, boy, but the people coming after us? They'll tear the world apart to get her back." A metallic screech echoed from the tunnel as a group of figures emerged. Men and women dressed in patched-together tactical gear, their weapons trained on the helicopter. At their head stood a woman with a scar running from her temple to her chin, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the shepherd and his tiny charge. "You found her," she breathed, her voice trembling with something between awe and terror. "After all these years, you actually found Subject Omega." The baby chose that moment to whimper, her glowing eyes fixing on the scarred woman. A silent understanding passed between them, one that made the shepherd's hackles rise. These people knew the child, knew what she was. And as the group parted to reveal a massive steel door at the end of the tunnel, the German shepherd realized with dawning horror that this wasn't just a hideout. It was another lab. The steel door hissed open, revealing a cavernous space that made the German shepherd's instincts scream in warning. The walls were lined with the same glowing symbols from the landing pad, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. The air smelled sterile, too clean, with an undercurrent of something metallic and sharp that reminded him of the hospital hallway. The baby in his jaws tensed, her tiny body radiating waves of distress that vibrated through their fading psychic connection. The scarred woman stepped forward, her cybernetic eye whirring as it adjusted focus. "Bring her inside," she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. "We don't have much time before they track us here." Raven placed a hand on the shepherd's back, his touch firm but not unkind. "It's all right," he murmured. "We're not like them. We don't cage our own." But the dog didn't miss the way the man's fingers trembled. With fear or excitement he couldn't tell. The baby's breath hitched as they crossed the threshold, her wide eyes reflecting the eerie blue light. The shepherd's paws tingled where they touched the floor, as if the very ground was humming with hidden energy. The main chamber opened up like the belly of some ancient beast. Workstations crammed with flickering monitors lined the walls, their screens displaying maps, security feeds, and, most disturbingly, dozens of files labeled "Subject," followed by Greek letters. At the center of the room stood a cylindrical glass pod, its surface etched with the same strange symbols. Empty now, but the stains at its base told a grim story. The scarred woman followed the shepherd's gaze and let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, we kept. 1, 2. Didn't work out so well for us." She tapped her cybernetic eye meaningfully. A sudden commotion erupted near the back of the chamber. A young man in a tattered lab coat burst through a side door, his face alight with manic energy. "She's here? Omega is actually here." His wild eyes locked onto the baby, and he lunged forward before 2 resistance members caught him by the arms. "Don't you understand?" he shrieked, spittle flying from his lips. "She's the key, the only one who can activate the—" The scarred woman backhanded him across the face with a sickening crack. "Shut your damn mouth, Elias," she snarled. "We do this by the protocol." The baby squirmed in the shepherd's grip, her tiny fingers curling into fists. A new vision slammed into the dog's mind with the force of a thunderclap. A vast, underground complex. Rows upon rows of glass pods, each holding a child in suspended animation. A man in a white coat, Director Kessler, standing before a massive machine, his hands resting on 2 glowing orbs, and beneath it all, a whispering voice, neither male nor female, that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Initiate final sequence. The evolution cannot be stopped." The vision shattered as the baby let out a piercing wail. Every light in the chamber flared blindingly bright before exploding in a rain of sparks. The resistance members cried out, shielding their eyes. Raven dropped to his knees, blood trickling from his nose. Only the shepherd remained unaffected, his enhanced senses cutting through the chaos. He saw the truth now, the scarred woman reaching for a hidden weapon, Elias grinning like a madman as he typed frantically on a handheld device, and beneath their feet, deep in the mountain's heart, something enormous powering up with a low, ominous hum. The baby's message was clear. This was never a rescue. It was a trap. The German shepherd didn't hesitate. He spun on his hind legs and bolted for the still open steel door, the baby clutched securely in his jaws. Behind him, the scarred woman's shout echoed off the walls. "Stop them! Don't let Omega reach the—" Her words cut off as the entire mountain shuddered. The floor heaved like a living thing, throwing resistance members off their feet. Alarms blared, their shrill screams punctuated by the sound of rending metal. The shepherd raced down the tunnel as the walls began to collapse around him, chunks of rock raining from above. The landing pad came into view. The helicopter still there, its rotor blades crumpled under a fallen boulder. No escape that way. Then he saw it. A narrow service tunnel, half hidden behind a cascade of sparks. The baby's energy surged through him again, pushing his muscles beyond their limits as he dove into the passage just as the main cavern collapsed behind them. The darkness swallowed them whole. The only sound the shepherd's ragged panting and the baby's quiet, determined breaths. They ran for what felt like hours, the tunnel sloping steadily upward. The air grew colder, fresher. Then, a pinprick of light in the distance. Moonlight, freedom. The shepherd burst from the tunnel mouth onto a rocky outcrop high in the mountains. Below them, the facility's self-destruction sent plumes of smoke spiraling into the night sky. But his relief was short-lived. The baby stiffened in his grasp, her tiny body going rigid. Following her gaze, the shepherd saw them. Figures emerging from the tree line, dozens, all dressed in black, all moving with that same unnatural grace. And at their center stood Director Kessler, his suit immaculate despite the chaos, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. "There you are," he said softly. "I knew you'd lead us to her eventually." The German shepherd bared his teeth, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his spirit unbroken. They wanted the baby. They'd have to go through him first. But then the impossible happened. The baby spoke. Not in his mind, not with a cry. Actual words, clear as a crystal in the cold mountain air. "Papa." And Director Kessler opened his arms. The word hung in the air like a gunshot, "Papa," and the German shepherd felt the ground drop out from beneath him. Director Kessler's face softened in a way that made the dog's hackles rise, his arms still outstretched toward the baby with a familiarity that spoke of long nights rocking her to sleep, of whispered lullabies in sterile white rooms. The black-clad figures surrounding them didn't move, their weapons lowered but still clutched tight in anticipation. The shepherd's muscles coiled, his teeth tightening instinctively around the baby's blanket. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that the man smelling of antiseptic and lies shouldn't be this close to the child he'd fought so hard to protect. Then the baby did something worse than speak. She reached out. Her tiny arms extended toward Kessler, fingers grasping at the air between them with desperate longing. The shepherd's heart hammered against his ribs, confusion and betrayal warring in his chest. He'd seen the visions, the glass pods, the needles, the cold-eyed scientists watching children like specimens under a microscope. He'd felt the baby's terror when the white-coated figures came for her at the hospital. None of this made sense. Kessler took a careful step forward, his polished shoes crunching on the rocky soil. "You've done well," he murmured, his gaze locked on the shepherd. "Better than any of our trained operatives, but she's mine. My greatest creation." His hand dipped into his pocket and emerged with a small silver device, a whistle, but unlike any the dog had seen before, its surface etched with those same strange symbols. "You'll remember this, won't you, boy?" The first note pierced the night air like a scalpel slicing through flesh. The shepherd's body locked up, his joints seizing as if gripped by invisible hands. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. A kennel with steel walls, the bite of electrodes against his skin, Kessler's face smiling down at him as pain lanced through his skull. The baby's psychic presence in his mind recoiled, her distress spiking as she too recognized the whistle's frequency. This wasn't just a tool. It was their tool, meant for them. Kessler blew the whistle again, the sound twisting into something deeper, darker. The shepherd's legs buckled, his jaw trembling against the overwhelming urge to release the baby. His vision swam with overlapping images. The facility beneath the mountain, yes, but another place too. A room with walls that pulsed like living tissue. A machine shaped like a cradle, its surface crawling with those glowing symbols. And Kessler standing over it all, whispering words that slithered into the dog's ears like living things. The bonding process is complete. The guardian has imprinted. The truth hit him like a bullet. He hadn't found the baby by accident. He'd been made to find her. The whistle's third note never came. A gunshot cracked through the night, and Kessler staggered back, the silver device flying from his fingers as blood bloomed across his shoulder. The shepherd's body unlocked all at once, the artificial memories dissolving like smoke. Behind them, from the mouth of the ruined tunnel, Raven emerged, his face streaked with blood and soot, his pistol still raised. "Run, you damn mutt!" he roared. "That's not her father!" "It's worse." The mountain shuddered again, this time with a sound like 1,000 voices screaming underground. The black-clad figures scrambled back as the earth split open between them, revealing a yawning chasm that glowed with the same eerie blue light as the facility's symbols. The baby wailed, her tiny hands clutching at the shepherd's fur as a new vision seared into his brain. The machine in the vision wasn't a cradle. It was a doorway, and something was coming through. Kessler laughed as he clutched his wounded shoulder, his blood dripping onto the hungry earth. "Too late," he gasped. "She's already called them, my perfect Omega." His eyes locked onto the baby with something like worship. "You wanted them to come, didn't you?" The German shepherd didn't wait to understand. He ran. Behind them, the world tore itself apart. The world dissolved into chaos as the German shepherd sprinted through the crumbling forest, the baby bouncing gently in his jaws. Behind them, the mountain continued its violent transformation. Trees uprooted themselves with grotesque slowness, their roots dripping with the same blue substance that pulsed through the facility's walls. The earth itself seemed to be breathing, expanding and contracting in waves that sent rocks tumbling like dice. Raven's final warning echoed in the shepherd's mind. "That's not her father." It's worse. The baby's psychic presence had gone silent, her energy completely drained after whatever she'd awakened in the mountain. But her physical grip on the shepherd's fur remained iron-tight, her tiny fingers tangled so deeply that it hurt. He didn't mind the pain, it anchored him, reminded him that she was still here, still real, even as the world around them became something from a nightmare. A new sound cut through the cacophony, a rhythmic, metallic clicking that set the shepherd's teeth on edge. He risked a glance over his shoulder and immediately wished he hadn't. Emerging from the glowing chasm were figures, tall, thin, their limbs too long, their movements too fluid, as if their bones were made of liquid metal. They moved in perfect unison, their featureless faces turning as one toward the fleeing shepherd and his precious cargo. Kessler stood before them, his arms raised in worship, his blood still dripping onto the hungry ground. "Yes!" he screamed, his voice cracking with ecstasy. "Take us home! Take us!" His words cut off abruptly as one of the figures simply absorbed him. There was no struggle, no violence. Kessler's body melted into the creature's form like a drop of water joining the ocean, his face the last to disappear, his expression frozen in rapture. The shepherd didn't wait to see more. He ran harder, his paws tearing against the rocky soil, his lungs burning with effort. The trees ahead began to twist themselves into a living barricade, branches knitting together with unnatural speed. He pivoted sharply, darting toward a narrow ravine where the blue glow seemed weaker. The baby stirred, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. A new image flickered weakly in the shepherd's mind, a cabin, old, wooden, hidden deep in the forest, with its own glowing symbols carved into the doorframe. A safe place. Her place. The vision came with a surge of urgency, and the shepherd adjusted his course without hesitation, trusting her instincts even as his own screamed at him to flee, in the opposite direction. The creatures, no, the things, following them moved faster now, their clicking growing louder, more insistent. The shepherd could feel their presence like a physical weight against his back, a wrongness that made his fur stand on end. He'd faced guns, soldiers, even government conspiracies. But this was something older, something hungrier. The ravine walls narrowed around them, the blue glow fading to a dull pulse beneath the thick layer of dead leaves underfoot. The baby's breathing evened slightly, her grip loosening just enough for the shepherd to adjust his hold without dropping her. Ahead, through a tangle of brambles, the promised cabin came into view, its windows dark, its porch sagging with age, but the symbols on its door glowing faintly in response to their approach. Hope flared in the shepherd's chest, then died just as quickly. Standing between them and the cabin was a figure he recognized, the scarred woman from the Resistance, her cybernetic eye dark and lifeless, her body held upright by the same blue tendrils that now webbed the entire forest. Her mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't hers. It was layered, infinite, the sound of 1,000 whispers speaking as one. You cannot hide her from us. She is the bridge, the key, the first and last of her kind. The baby went rigid in the shepherd's jaws, and for the first time since he'd found her in that cardboard box by the road, she screamed. The baby's scream tore through the night, a sound so raw and full of terror that the German shepherd felt it vibrate deep in his bones. The scarred woman, or what was left of her, took a jerky step forward, her movements controlled by the blue tendrils snaking through her flesh. The whispering voices grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic chorus that made the air itself feel heavy. The cabin behind her stood as their only hope, its door symbols pulsing faster now, as if sensing the baby's distress. The shepherd knew they couldn't turn back. The creatures from the mountain were closing in, their clicking noises growing louder, more frantic. The trees around them bent and twisted, branches reaching like skeletal fingers to block their path. Every instinct told him to fight, to tear into the scarred woman and whatever was controlling her. But the baby's presence in his mind, though weak, pushed him forward with a single, clear thought. Run. Don't stop. With a burst of speed he didn't know he still had, the shepherd lunged to the side, dodging the scarred woman's outstretched hands. His shoulder slammed against the cabin door, and the moment he made contact, the symbols flared bright white. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a darkness that felt alive, waiting. He stumbled inside, the baby still clutched in his jaws, and the door slammed shut behind them with a force that shook the walls. Silence. The cabin was small, lit only by the faint glow of more symbols carved into the wooden beams. A crib sat in the corner, its blankets neatly folded. Toys lined a shelf, untouched by dust, and in the center of the room, an old woman sat in a rocking chair, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, wise, tired, locked onto the shepherd and the baby. "You made it," she said softly, as if she'd been expecting them. The baby squirmed, her tiny arms reaching for the woman. The shepherd hesitated, but the woman smiled. "It's all right, you've done your part." She took the baby gently, cradling her close. The moment their skin touched, the baby's screams stopped. Her body relaxed, and for the first time since the mountain she looked peaceful. Outside, the whispering grew frantic. The cabin shuddered as something heavy slammed against the walls. The old woman didn't flinch. She simply stroked the baby's cheek and sighed. "They've been waiting for her for a long time," she murmured. "But she was never theirs to take." The shepherd stood guard, his body tense, ready to fight even though he knew, deep down, this battle wasn't his to win. The old woman met his gaze. "You were never just a dog, were you?" she said. "You were chosen. For her." A final, thunderous crash shook the cabin. The door trembled, the symbols flickering. The old woman closed her eyes and began to hum, a lullaby, ancient and soft. The baby's eyelids fluttered, her breathing slowing as she drifted into sleep. And then, with a sound like a sigh, the cabin's symbols blazed to life, their light so bright it filled every corner of the room. The shepherd felt warmth spread through his body, a sense of peace he'd never known. The chaos outside faded, the whispers silenced. The last thing he saw was the old woman smiling down at him, her voice gentle but firm. "Rest now, guardian, you've earned it." The light swallowed everything. Epilogue. The storm had passed. Days later, hikers found a German shepherd lying in the grass at the edge of the woods, his fur matted with dirt and dried blood, but his breathing steady. Beside him, wrapped in a clean blanket, a baby girl cooed softly, her tiny fingers wrapped around his paw. When rescuers arrived, they marveled at the miracle. No one could explain how the two had survived the night, let alone the violent storm that had torn through the area. The baby was healthy, her vitals perfect. The shepherd, though weak, refused to leave her side. News spread quickly. The miracle baby and her guardian dog, they called them. The town rallied around the pair, offering homes, help, and love. But the shepherd knew the truth. Their journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes they have 4 paws and a heart brave enough to love when the world has turned away. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. Moral lesson. True courage isn't about strength or power. It's about loyalty, love, and the will to protect what matters most, even when the world feels like it's ending. The smallest acts of kindness from the most unexpected places can light the darkest paths.